over-the-top slugfest on skates actually began almost 70 years earlier in a somewhat different format.
In 1935, my father, Leo Seltzer, had the idea of putting a marathon on roller skates. The skaters skated on a bank track, 18 laps of the mile. People would come to watch this new attraction. It was the height of the Depression, so they could get in for 10 cents and spend the time there.
Leo Seltzer soon decided to take his skating marathons on the road. He assumed other cities would be just as receptive as his native Chicago. But according to Keith Coppage, author of Roller Derby to Roller Jam, Leo hadn't yet found the secrets of success.
It was a very slow build from city to city. Sometimes they go in and would just bomb. They scheduled themselves for weeks at a time. If a race didn't work, they would shorten their stay.
Without consistent audiences, the future of these roller skating spectacles was in jeopardy. But Seltzer soon noticed that during the competitions, spectators would cheer anytime one player accidentally slammed into another. When a reporter covering the skating marathon suggested physical contact be legalized, the roller derby was born.
That was the moment that roller derby became the sort of rock'em sock'em thing. From 1938 on was when it became contact skating.
As the roller derby became more popular, the skaters began traveling from city to city, attracting crowds wherever they competed. But a tragic event would almost end the sport for good.
Sometime in 1938, there was a terrible bus crash which practically wiped out the whole troop of skaters. They lost about 22 lives. It practically ended the game, and there was quite a lot of discussion, should the game go on? And the skaters said, we need to see this through, and we'll remember the skaters another way. To this very day, and all throughout the history of roller derby, the number 1 is never used. It's to memorialize all the skaters that lost their lives in that crash, so you'll never see a number 1 on a roller derby skater.
The roller derby soon regrouped and began touring again. But it would be another 10 years before the sport would receive national recognition, thanks to a new invention called television.
The first night, they did a live broadcast from New York, and there were maybe 500 people. Within a day or two, you could not get a ticket to it. It was a story of the power of television.
From the 9th Regiment Armory on 14th Street in New York City, the Metropolitan Broadcasting Corporation presents Roller Derby. Hello there, fans. This is Eric Page, along with Ken Nidell, welcoming you to another action-packed hour of Roller Derby.
It became such an overnight smash that all the networks at the time were bidding for the rights. The rights eventually went to ABC. In writing the book, I found a week that there was about 15 hours of roller derby programming, prime time. They were so dependent on it, and it was the biggest show on ABC.
And there's the gun starting the second half of play.
The teams continued to travel around the country, competing in both large cities and small towns. But while the crowds grew bigger and more enthusiastic, life on the road was never easy for the players.
The skaters were very superstitious about traveling by bus, so actually they traveled by their own cars, and we'd give them a road map and where they're supposed to be, and they'd go from Youngstown to Pittsburgh, to Scranton, to New York, and they called it kind of the endless tour.
We traveled all year long. On the holidays, we skated double headers, and Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving, we'd have one in the afternoon, then you'd a big Thanksgiving meal and try to skate the game at night and stuff. But you know, it's just what you get used to, and you have to do it.
In the mid-50s, television began to come into its own. But as Hollywood started to produce more sophisticated programming, there was little room for roller derby. Without TV exposure, the derby was in trouble.
Overnight, the bottom just fell out. They were dependent on television to get the people in to buy the tickets to go to the games. That fed the salaries. There were some very, very lean years in the 1950s. Eventually, the game moved to San Francisco and Los Angeles, where it sort of eked out a modest existence for several years.
Although the competitions continued, roller derby attracted little attention. But in 1958, a local TV station in San Francisco began broadcasting the games. Once again, television would be roller derby's savior.
It was an immediate hit on this particular station. Live games began to be skated more regularly. It became the #1 show in a lot of rating situations. It beat out Bonanza and several other staples of 60s television. They eventually began to sell the series on film and videotape to stations around the country, at one point being on about 120 stations in virtually every market.
An uproar here in the Oakland Coliseum Arena in this championship game right now.
The roller derby was back and bigger than ever. During the 1960s, skaters such as Ann Calvello, Charlie O'Connell, and Joni Weston became celebrities. Wherever the derby traveled, die-hard fans packed stadiums.
O'Connell. Here he comes now. O'Connell moving on Monty. Monty breaks away. But he's hit by O'Connell. But he keeps Butler from scoring. A man on the rail is passed to a point by Butler.
One of my favorite things or whatever is when we skated the first Madison Square Gardens. There's just something about the Gardens. It was the best crowd they ever had, over 19,000.
3 points give the Bombers the lead.
Rolling Stone photographer Baron Woolman became a fan of the Derby in the 60s and would eventually become the game's principal photographer.
I was taught that you don't hit women. But here I go into this place. Not only can you hit women, they're getting paid to hit each other, these women. And I can't explain to this day what it is about it, but it seemed there was something in my system that responded to that.
Throughout the 60s and early 70s, roller derby enjoyed its greatest success. In each city the Derby visited, thousands of fans would fill sports arenas.
The success was really outstanding, and we had, in September of 1972, we sold out White Sox Park in Chicago with a little over 50,000 people.
The roller derby seemed unstoppable. Attendance was high and profits were up. Few would have guessed that within a year, roller derby would shut down for good. The roller derby, precursor to today's roller jam, hit its peak in the late 60s and early 70s, playing to sellout crowds around the country. But despite its success, the demise of the derby was just around the corner.
People didn't realize that the Roller Derby League was basically a small family enterprise, which I owned and operated all the teams and did all the scheduling. And we hit really a series of very bad events in 1972.
A problem developed in that the skaters went on all these one-nighters, usually by car. And there was a gas shortage at the time, which really cut into an awful lot of the profits.
Gas stations had long lines. Arenas closed down in the winter because they couldn't heat the buildings. People were hesitant to travel.
With basically one family, the Seltzer family, owning all the teams, being responsible for all their needs and all the accommodations and insurance and everything else, it began to be too much. There were some losses. And rather than see the game go down to a reduced state, it was decided that they would look for a way out.
In December of 1973, I shut down roller derby, and that was really the end of the game as it existed.